Hello and welcome to the December edition of the Kushmerek Connection. As always, filmed in downtown Fitchburg with the help of our incredible host, Fitchburg Access Television, located right on Boulder Drive in Fitchburg. Joining us today, we have a special guest, someone that we haven't had on the show before, D.A. Joseph D. Early Jr. D.A., thank you for coming on the show, for all the incredible work that you do in our community. Just thrilled to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Rep. Michael, I really appreciate it. It's great to be up here.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
It always is. It's a great part of the county.
Well, you're no stranger here. You're often in the community. The work that I've seen you do in my district in Fitchburg and in Lunenburg, just absolutely great. I think.
Well, thanks.
I think the partnership that you have with the state and municipal officials at a local level is really the envy of a lot of my colleagues around the Commonwealth. So thanks for your commitment to representing all of your constituents.
Well, look, it's easy to work with you. It's easy to work with people and the mayor, the police chief. It's great up here. I love it up here. Unfortunately, I don't get up enough on good things. That sometimes some of the bad things outweigh it. But we're in the schools. We're doing a ton of stuff there on prevention, and it's great to be up in Fitchburg.
Well, it's great to have you. For folks who might not be familiar, who are either new to this community or really just starting to tune in, and tell us a little bit about how you, who you are and how you got involved, maybe some of the work that led up to you running for DA.
Sure. I'm 66 years old. I just turned 66 the other day. I'm from Worcester, one of 8 kids. I'm the oldest of 8, Marilyn, Joseph Early. And I went to high school in Worcester. I went to UMass, went to Georgetown Law. And after that, I worked as an assistant district attorney for a couple of years for Matty Ryan in Hampden County in Springfield, Massachusetts. Then I went to Boston, worked for Jimmy Shannon with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. From there, I hung out my shingle, as they say, and I practiced law for 17 years. I practiced a lot of mental health law, criminal law, and also eminent domain. So it was kind of a weird mix. But I had a father, as you know, who was involved in politics. The story goes he won his first election for state representative by 1 vote. I think it actually was 3 votes. But that's
a landslide.
Yeah, yeah. But it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
And after 11 years in the House of Representatives, Congressman Harold Donahue retired, and he ran for Congress. And I had no designs on running for politics ever, but I got to see a little bit about what he was doing, Mike. And I don't think there's a day or a week doesn't go by someone doesn't say, "Did I ever tell you what your dad did for my family?" And I thought, what a great way to live your life. And if you can, as I heard someone say, if you don't mind getting out of bed, going to work, help people, and make a buck doing it, you're a success. So I watched him, and after a while, I said, something, I want to take a crack at this. And I first ran for state senate, and I got beat. And I learned some valuable lessons. And I wasn't meant to be in that job. I'm convinced God has a plan, but he laughs at our plans. My father had a stroke the same day. They told us we were going to bury him, and that we needed a funeral home. And I'll never forget Father Jimmy Shea coming in, giving him the healing prayer, which I thought the last rites was say, St. Pete, this guy's on his way up, let him in. But he made it that day, and we had him around 12 years, and I ran for that race. That was election day. He had the stroke, and then 6 years later, I ran for district attorney, and I haven't looked back.
That's incredible.
It's a great story.
Yeah. Well, that's I think something really important you said there too. It's I think every day try to live by the creative. Make at least one person's life better or day better.
That's pretty good.
And that's I think that's what we all try to do when we're in office. And sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but there's nothing better than hearing those stories, whether it's your own or someone else come up to you and say, "Can I tell you what somebody in elected office did for me?" And I'll never forget it. And I think we each have those stories of our own, being on the other side of it.
Well, and I see you doing it too. You're out in the community all the time. I see the work that you do up here in Fitchburg, and people, they go by, they don't like you, they love you. So I think you know exactly what it means to help people, serve people, be in this business to make things better for people. And good for you.
That's why we do it, right?
Yeah, that's why we do it.
So I think there's some folks who don't always know what a DA does. Sometimes you're absolutely right. You mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not always the fun things that bring you to a community, and they might see you on the news or in the newspaper. But can you talk a little bit about, or as much as you'd like, really, about all of the things that your office does, as well as how many cities and towns you cover in your district?
So a district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer within the county. And I mean, ours is called the Middle District, but it's really Worcester County. We don't have Athol, but we do have Bellingham. But altogether, the DA represents 60 cities and towns, about 835,000 people, 59 police chiefs, two towns share the same chief. And you're charged for prosecuting all of the crimes that occur. But there's a different aspect to this that I think is the most important part of the job, and that's the prevention of crime. And there's an old guy in law enforcement, Sir Robert Peel. He wrote Sir Robert Peel's 10 Laws of Policing in 1828. And the first one was to prevent crime and disorder, to prevent. So while we prosecute, we do a great, Chief Martineau here, you get a great department. We do great things with them. We get the Fitchburg District Court. We've got 11 district courts. We've got one that handle the misdemeanors, one Superior Court that handles the felony, 4 juvenile courts that handle children under the age, young people under the age of 18, those who haven't reached their 18th birthday. So while we go after the drug dealers, we go after the kidnappers, the bank robbers, the murderers, we also put a big focus, and we've done a lot of it up here, on prevention. And I put our best and brightest prosecutors in the juvenile court because what I learned when I was out in private practice for 17 years, all of these young kids that came through my door, for the most part, almost all of them, made a mistake. And it was usually a mistake around drugs or alcohol, or something with regards to domestic violence, or an improper touching. And what we learned was, if you can get to the young child after they've been arrested, you can change and modify behaviors under the age of 18 much more successfully than you can after the age of 18. And if you can also keep kids busy, and we've done a lot of work with the Fitchburg schools, Fitchburg-Lunenburg area, the schools, the Boys and Girls Clubs. We mentioned Donato earlier, who used to run the Boys and Girls Club. We take drug dealers' money, the drug forfeiture funds, and put it into prevention programs that keep kids busy around responsible adults between the hours of 3 to 6 p.m. The Justice Department told us that #1 crime prevention tool. And for every dollar we spend on prevention, we save $7 to $10 of taxpayer dollars.
That's incredible.
In the criminal justice system. And by doing this and working with our partners, whether it be the Boys and Girls Club, whether it be the schools, Fitchburg, we've done a lot with all of the teams. We've reduced juvenile delinquency complaints by 79%. And I remember my dad saying, good things in government don't happen by accident, they happen because of hard work. So that's kind of what we do. We have a district court, a superior court, we have a child advocacy center for the first time, nationally accredited child advocacy center that helps children, especially those who have been abused or sexually abused, helps them through the process so they only tell their story once. And we also have an opioid task force, which we've renamed to the Prevention and Support Network. We're over 600 strong now, and we're trying through grants to get people into treatment rather than into a jail cell. This is a scourge that hit us in a large part because of the Sackler family and Purdue Pharmaceutical. If you watch on Hulu, if you watch Dope Sick, or you read the book Dreamland, it tells you a lot of these kids started with a sports injury or a wisdom tooth, and the Sackler family told us that OxyContin was not addictive when they knew that it wasn't. The other successful thing we do is we're in the schools every day. We're in Fitchburg all the time, talking about things like our #1 most requested program, bullying and internet safety, trying to teach kids to use the golden rule, domestic violence, safe dating, drugs and alcohol, texting and driving. We've addressed over 600,000 people, and we're also in the senior center, and the senior centers in the area, talking to our elderly about frauds and scams, because that is the most trusting generation, and they're constantly getting bombarded with frauds and scams right now, people trying to separate them from their hard-earned money. So we bring an awareness to the elderly on that as well.
That's an incredible scope of activity for one office.
I've got a lot of good people. We have 180 employees. I got some great people that work for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's really just thinking from from the prosecution side all the way through your prevention and just your outreach. And again, you're always in the community too, and so. You also talked, you've done a lot of advocacy around child care and early childhood education, and I remember you've shared some statistics in the past just around the likelihood that, if you go through child care and early childhood education, am I correct, you're exponentially less likely to end up behind bars at some point in your life?
You're right on the money, Mike. The statistics show us that if you can get I remember having a discussion about prevention once with a prosecutor from Colorado, and he said, Joe, when do you think prevention starts? I said, I used to think it was 13 or 16. Now I know it's 8 to 12. He goes, Joe, you're wrong, it's younger. And I said, how's that? He goes, it starts at conception. I said, conception? Explain that to me. He said, well, when you have the young pregnant mother and you get them into services, prenatal care, basic parenting skills, you're starting them down the right road. Then, when they have services, if you can get a child into pre-K, they're much more likely to succeed. And about 60% of the kids who don't get into pre-K don't close the gap between those that do and those that don't. Yeah. They're the first ones to be acting out in school. They're the first ones to get into trouble. They're the first ones to get suspended. So really, education, universal pre-K, is a great precursor to keeping people out of the criminal justice system. We also do a great program with trauma. We now, working with Ernie Martineau, working with all our chiefs, we have a system where kids who are traumatized will go to school, and in the past, they might act up. They might fall asleep in class. They're definitely not prepared, but oftentimes they're in school for the ringing of the first bell. Yeah. Now, the police department will call the school with a simple 3-word message, Johnny Jones, handle with care. So in the past, where they might have gotten disciplined, now they get a warm hug. We also do something with drug-endangered children, and we have a SIMS program where someone who overdoses, within 24 hours, a police officer, plainclothes police officer and recovery specialist, and we recently got a $1.2 million grant to do this. They'll knock on the door of the person who overdosed and lived and ask them if they'd like services. And right now, about 40 to 50% of those people have accepted services.
That's incredible.
It is incredible.
And not only you potentially saving a life and preventing a future overdose, but again, you spoke early. If you do these programs well and effectively, you're actually saving taxpayer money as well.
Huge. And they're the families. The police department, they'll get frustrated because they may have Narcaned the person, and that's something that reverses an overdose, and the opioids bounce off the receptor. They may have Narcaned the person once this week, twice this week, two or three times last week. The family will be calling us, and they'll be begging us to get them sectioned. Well, we can get them sectioned, but it doesn't last very long. Right. If we can get them a bed, and if we can get them treatment, we know it takes about 9 months to 2 years to rewire the brain. If we can work on the populace and tell them, look, we've got to get past this stigma, because this is a disease, no different than heart disease, no different than diabetes. And if we treat it that way, we get a great chance of beating it. So by working with all the community partners, we're working with GAMA up here, we're working with CPAR, Family Continuity. When you go alone, you go fast. When you go together, you go further. And you've been very good to us, helping us with financing for our budget as well, and I thank you for that. I think you see the things that are important, Mike, and I appreciate that, and the prevention work that you do, and bringing us up here for donations for the skate park. Again, keeping kids busy around responsible adults. This is what works. It's proven time and time again.
Well, skate parks and the skate park in Lunenburg, Fitchburg High Athletics, you've been an incredible supporter of as well. So I'm so appreciative of the work that you've done there, and you and I have spoken about it before. I'm on the Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery, and I often share pieces of my life story. That a lot of my early childhood was defined by my parents' struggles with both mental health and substance use, and in turn it scarred me. There was trauma, right, and a lot of those same stories that we see in our community and in our schools each and every day. And I really consider myself fortunate. There was that, the two paths there.
Yeah.
One that probably ended on, on the receiving end of programs and services that your office, would have come knocking for. And on the other end, fortunately, led to me sitting in a studio wearing a suit talking to you. And I consider myself, fortunate and truly just lucky because I didn't grow up in your district, and I didn't really have access to some of the incredible services that you're offering. And so often I see in my community, despite all of the programs and the incredible work that you do, that Chief Martineau does, we still have young people slipping through the cracks, and we still have increasingly an opioid epidemic that I think everybody in the Commonwealth and throughout the country is really trying to wrap their arms around. But you've done some really incredible work in trying to bridge together the community partners. What is it that inspired you to really forge down this path as a leader in both opiates and now that substance use and recovery space?
I guess I got a couple of heroes in my life, and Congressman John Lewis, George Herbert Walker Bush, who I got to know when I was in D.C., but my father. My father got 1,600 pieces of legislation passed in Congress, and he never took credit for any of it. He said to me one day, "How many times do you think I've had my name on a bill that passed?" I said, "I don't know, Dad, half." I said, "No, a third." "No, Dad, I know where this is going." "How many?" He goes, "One." And that's because the guy threatened to pull the bill if he didn't put his name on it, and he got all those passed. But I was also told by a congressman, very conservative congressman from Minnesota, Vin Weber, that my father was responsible for an extra $500 million a year to the National Institutes of Health. And what he said was, Joe, when I asked about it, he said, "Joey, 95 cents every health dollar goes to treatment, 5 cents goes to prevention." And I thought, what a great philosophy. And I said, "I want to run for DA." And he said, "You're crazy. You're making a good buck. Is your wife okay with this? You're going to get criticized. Don't run for the job unless you can accept criticism." I said, "No. I think what I can do is we can do the same thing with crime that you're trying to do with health, and that's prevent crime." So I really think we're down here for each other. I think it's one of the golden rule. You treat people the way you want to be treated. I think we live for each other. And the more you can do for other people, I've found that it comes back to you 100 times over. It makes it a safe community. It makes it a better place. It makes it easier for kids. Hopefully keep them away from trauma. It cuts down on crime. So I didn't want to be in my 70s and say, I could have made a difference. Instead, I took the buck. I wanted to do something where I could say I made a difference. And eventually, when you do pass or you get close to that, you say, I'm proud of what I did. And I was proud of what my father did. I got into this because of the people that were important to me. George Herbert Walker Bush, I remember I ran into him. I used to have a great job in D.C., and he came in one day, and he said, "Joe, we're counting on you to pass that bar exam." And my feet didn't hit the floor for 3 hours. Congressman John Lewis, arrested 42 times for civil disobedience. But he's a great example of how one person can make a difference. And I remember my father talking about Congressman Lewis and how he took the beatings, and what a true warrior he was, and how tough he was, and mentally tough he was. Those are some of the things that inspired me to take a shot at this and get into public life.
That's incredible. Sometimes that's what you need, though, are those heroes you can look up to. And
yeah, we all have heroes.
And I love
dreams. Yeah.
I love that two people that you just pointed out on different ends of the political spectrum and different political parties.
Very much so. George Herbert Walker Bush was a gentleman to everyone I worked with. I was down in the House Gymnasium. He used to bring in gifts for the other workers who they didn't have much, but he was always very personable with them. And when you consider he was a World War II hero. He got shot down off of the island of Iwo Jima, next to Iwo Jima, and he was drifting in, and if that Australian submarine hadn't come out of the water, he would have been gone.
Right. Think about that. Yeah.
And John Lewis, just a great guy. And I remember after my dad died, I said to him, "Congressman, my father loved you." And he said, "Joey, I loved your dad. He was the nicest person I've ever met." Those are the things that you... Yeah. Yeah,
you take that with those for the rest of your life, and I had one of those. I was an 8th grader, and John McCain, my brother interned on John McCain's 2000, his first presidential run in the primary against George Bush, and I had the chance to meet him very briefly, and I remember him saying, "Young man, today's a school day," and I'm like, "I got an excused absence to come see you. I came with my big brother." And he was like, "That's the kid that's been on my bus stop for 2 months in New Hampshire." I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know, thanks for letting my brother come along." And he was like, "Young man, we need more young people like you in politics."
Isn't that awesome?
And it was one of those stuck with me for the rest of my life of, you know, young man, I hope you hang in there because we need you.
A true hero, John McCain, a true hero, patriot. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
So, you know, I think you just pointed to I think people that have led an incredible career and their ability to collaborate with others and bring together people with different viewpoints, perspectives, and functions to bring about a common good. And, you know, I see, particularly through the lens of North Worcester County, I see this incredible ecosystem of law enforcement, whether it's Ernie Martineau or Chief Gamble in Lunenburg, Judge Lecanto and Carol Vittorioso, who's the clerk magistrate, and Sheriff Evangelitis and yourself really come together to create this incredible network where there's strong collaboration at the ground level up, and not only just working with the municipal leaders, but you know, I look at things like you know, diversion programs, and you've done a lot around, you know, diversion, and trying to make sure that it's not just giving someone a second chance, but it's giving them the right chance and ensuring that, you know, not only they have they have the chance to succeed. Can you talk a little bit about that collaboration with that, that whole ecosystem?
Sure. What we found was when I was in private practice, and you mentioned diversion, you get arrested, and once you're arraigned, even if you're not guilty, you still have a record. So when an employer goes to look at you, if you've been arraigned for disorderly, disturbing the peace, shoplifting, you carry a record with you, and it hurts you, whether it be a job, getting on a police department, getting a loan. So one of the things that we did now, and it had never been done in Worcester County before, started a diversion program. So if the young kid makes a mistake, and none of us are perfect, we postpone the arraignment. They give us 8 hours community service, working on one of the fields where the kids play after school, working in a soup kitchen, working in a food pantry. If they successfully complete that, they come back, if it's a drug and alcohol offense, take a 1-hour online test. We dismiss it prior to arraignment, but with the young person's held accountable, and they give something back. Working with the sheriff, we do different things with regards to the opioid crisis.
Sure.
I know he just started a model up there called the Essex model. We all went out and saw where people get services at the jail. Instead of just being in a day room watching Family Feud and Price is Right all day, they have peer review, one-on-one with a psychiatrist, AA, a little bit of exercise to get the natural release of dopamine back in their brains, another peer review. So they're getting services all day. So we intersect with the courts, with the sheriff, with our representatives, arguing and pleading with you for money to fund these programs. We use the drug forfeiture funds on the prevention end of it. But all the pieces of the puzzle are there. So when you step out of your silos, I found, and when you work together, again, going alone, you go fast. Going together, working together, you get so much more done. And working together is really a force multiplier. No one can do this alone. But everyone has their strengths. And when you bring all the strengths to bear, that's good government. That really is good government.
Well, and it bears itself out in the stats and the data for your time in office. We're really seeing you know, the results and the incredible work that you've done.
But we can always do better.
Absolutely, we've always got a lot more work to do, don't we? You know, I think we touched on it earlier about, you know, kind of making someone's day better and you know, remembering some of those that you helped. What are you work in probably. And arguably the toughest, and I think sometimes the subject matter is the darkest. Out of all of the elected officials in the Commonwealth, you and your colleagues as district attorneys deal with dark subject matter, but undoubtedly there are those moments you go home and you have those, God, I don't know how I got through today, but you have to think back to the success stories or those moments where you remember why you do what you do. What for you? What are one of those stories that that make you feel like this is why you wake up in the morning?
Well, there was a guy up in the North County, and he was at a house with a woman and 3 other men, and he wasn't that bright, and there was a young baby there, and he was hoping to date the woman, and it just wasn't working for him. So on the way out of the house that night, he stole the baby. And the baby was only 3 or 4 months old, and I'll never forget this. I think it was up in this area. And when the woman went to bed, she noticed the baby was missing. So when you say these stories, inevitably when I go into school, they say, what's the worst thing that ever happened? And I go, I won't tell you what's the worst thing that happened, but I'll tell you the story. And I tell this story. So he went home. Everyone was brought in the morning. The wife went to bed, called the police, state police. From my office, our state police detective unit show up, and everyone gets interviewed. Well, this gentleman, when he showed up at the police department, he vomited. He vomited into a can. And you're right. So often I get bad stories, bad information. So my detective lieutenant at the time was Rick McCune, went on to become colonel, a great colonel. So in the morning, everyone had been interviewed but this one guy. So Sergeant Danny Richards, who's now a major, called the hospital, because when he vomited, he went over to the hospital and said, can I talk to Johnny Jones? And he said, well, he's not here. Oh, when did he leave? Oh, he never came by. Boom! All the cars go to Johnny Jones' house. They say to the mother, where is he? She goes, he's not here. So the sergeant, who is pretty good at picking up on cues and lies, said, where is he? You better hurry, he's going out the back door. They brought Johnny Jones back to the police department. Now, it's one of those summer days where it's overcast, and it's in July, and it's starting to burn off. It's about 8:39 in the morning. And the gentleman sat down in front of Danny Richards. He goes, where's the baby? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, you're looking at a murder charge if that baby's dead. Where's the baby? It's in the trunk of the Honda in the driveway where you just were. Immediately, everyone goes back to the house. Now, you know how hot it gets in a car on a summer day. It's just starting to burn off. It's just starting to get hot. I get a call from Rick McCune. Joe, hold on. We got the baby. I'll know in a second or two if it's alive. And all of a sudden, you hear it's surreal. You hear sirens, you hear ambulances, you hear police, you hear busy chatter. Pop the trunk, pop the trunk, pop the trunk. They pop the trunk, all of a sudden they hear tango, tango, tango. The baby's alive. That was one of the best days on the job. That was one of the best days.
Never forget that voice over the radio, I'm sure. Right?
But there's a lot of small victories, too, and a lot of that comes with seeing these kids busy after school. We get a great intern program. I suggest anyone who wants to learn about the law. And one person can change the world. Come down and watch and see what we do, especially if you're a young man or woman of color. There just aren't enough men or women of color in the legal profession. And life is about showing up. And you want to be guaranteed a job and employment forever, become a lawyer, if you're a person of color or minority. But it's for everyone. And if you want to change the world, if you can learn what your why is, why you're here, and it makes your what you do so impactful. I mean, I talk to you, that's what we're doing, but I'm bringing a bigger message. That's my why. Why I get into this job, why I love this job, why I love helping people. So when you learn your why, your what becomes much more impactful, and I can see that you know your why, and that's being in the State House, that's helping people, that's being a father. You know, that you should talk about with passion about your child a little while ago. That's your why. And when you're in your why, you walk with purpose, and I think that's one of the parts I love about this job.
It's the best job on earth, isn't it?
It's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, D.A. Early, thank you so much for the work that you do, your commitment to your community and all of our communities. Thank you for coming on this show, and to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, hope you enjoy a wonderful holiday season ahead. We'll see you in the new year. Thank you, as always, to FATV. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Representative.